Hello, this is Paul. I'm at the Appalachian Studies Association Conference, the 46th annual. This was the panel discussion I was hoping to have on new media ventures here in Appalachia. So I did invite a bunch of people, but apparently I guess this is 4 o'clock, so it's hard to find people. So I'm just going to go ahead with the. So hello, your name is again Beth.
I'm Cassidy.
Cassidy. Okay. Like Butch Cassidy, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, well, thank you for coming, Cassidy.
Thanks for doing this.
And, well, all right. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and film it. So, hopefully, if more people come in, I'm just going to start over. Okay, so I guess we just watched this film about the need for independent media, you know, like about the increasing frequency of news deserts. Okay, let me put this maybe in slideshow view. So here we can see that, you know, these counties highlighted in red are counties that have absolutely zero newspapers. So yes, some down here in West Virginia, and you know, the ones here highlighted in yellow are ones that have only one newspaper. So, and of course, yes, in those counties, oftentimes they are shrinking their staffs. So yes, it is becoming harder and harder. So basically, our news outlets, they just can't be everywhere at once to cover everything that's important. And of course, yes, those that do remain are often owned by, owned either by investment groups or private corporations or publicly traded chains. So yes, you can see where a lot of these are, that are often, with no local control. They have no mooring in the area and no understanding of the issues of the area. Okay, well, these are 4 news media outlets in the western Pennsylvania area. This is mine, Allegheny Independent Media. I know it looks a little funny on the screen here. One Hood Media, that's been created like around Pittsburgh. Public Source, this is another, I guess, nonprofit news outlet. An unabridged press that frequently covers the issues around the disabled community. Of course, those are, I guess you could say, responsible news media outlets. I mean, of course, there are lots of irresponsible ones out there, including, that may more resemble Alex Jones, InfoWars, where he's now been sued for $1 billion for defaming the victims of the Sandy Hook massacre. And so yes, this is where one does have to be careful about what one says and about their sources. And so one doesn't necessarily have to have a journalism degree. I mean, my background is actually more in statistics and research. So, yes, you do have to be very careful about your sources and very careful about what you say and do. So, I do feel that is at least similar what journalists do. So, yes, there is a Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University that covers, that aids, assists new media outlets to try to fill the void left by all those closing all the closing news media outlets. So, and another advantage that nonprofit media has that for-profit media doesn't is they don't have to be dependent on advertiser funding, and that they do not have to, their content is they're often pressured by their advertisers not to print certain things that would make their advertisers look bad. So, my outlet, yes, but certainly training is essential. So here, this is my website, Allegheny Independent Media. I did a lot. I used my statistical skills to look at, say, trends related to COVID in the area, like looking at here. So like here, this graph shows that, say, and this is just the 10-county area surrounding Johnstown, where I am from. Looking at Westmoreland, Clearfield, Indiana, Cambria, all this 10-county region, looking at how, as the average of mentally unhealthy days increases, so does the case mortality for COVID. So that's the probability of dying if you catch COVID. So yes, and this is also correlated with like with individuals who are more highly vaccinated. So yes, Bedford County has a low vaccination rate. Cambria was in the middle, but Westmoreland or Center County were the highest. So yes, plus I do that. Plus I've done lots of interviews. Like here, just some other charts I've had, like this one here, looking at, white, like the percent white in each county in Pennsylvania and the percentage that voted for Trump. So yes, certainly, yes, this is for the 67 counties in Pennsylvania, you get this pretty looking graph. Like, just the percent. So obviously the whiter the county was and the less educated the county was, the more likely they were to vote for Trump. This was 2016. And yes, well, of course I also do look at national polls, and yes, this data is a little old, but still Trump's favorability ratings are still like about 38 to 40%. So yes, he still is a front runner for the nomination. So here's just some samples of things that I do. Yes, this is a graph looking at, right, it's a rather noisy graph. This dotted line down here is the number of deaths per day, like a 7-day average. And this is the number of new cases per day. And like here, this yellow line's vaccination rates, and the purple line is boosters, and the red line are cases. Oh, hello.
Sorry.
No problem. Well, actually, you just doubled my audience.
Sorry.
No, I'm glad you came.
I meant to be here a long time ago, and I kept meeting people I hadn't seen.
Well, okay, actually. Well, as I said, I'm happy to start over.
No.
I actually don't have that many slides, so I was just gonna present what I do, like why we need new media outlets in the area, like the risk of like so many areas, especially in Appalachia, are at risk of becoming news deserts. So I'm happy to start over. Okay, so yes, I'm really glad you came. Your name is?
Susan, one of them. You know, they
Susan.
put the wrong room number on this.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
I thought it was I thought it said 304.
I thought it said 306, at least that's what I wrote down.
Oh.
It's 3 or 4 in my notes, but maybe I got it
Okay,
wrong.
well, it's
Accidentally didn't work
Well, maybe it was in the addendum. I don't know if they changed the addendum. I didn't look at the addendum.
I showed up to 3 different sessions today, but just no one was at the
Alright, let's see.
Yeah, this is the second.
I don't even know where I put the addendum. Okay, well, I guess, you know, I just read it here, 304. There was nobody else here, so I'm sure.
I was looking in the old sketch, I was looking in the online schedule, not
Oh, okay, well. Well, nobody ever told me the room was changed, so. Okay, well, I'll start over. You know, we watched this one video here about new media, like, you know, the danger of news deserts well, not just in Appalachia, but all over the US.
Weeks are showing once again just how tough the business of news is right now, with layoffs by digital upstarts and by the country's largest newspaper chain, Gannett. BuzzFeed laid off 15% of its staff, while the Huffington Post and Yahoo News cut hundreds of jobs under their new owner, Verizon. Many are more worried that a hedge fund-backed group known for gutting newsrooms might buy Gannett. That would potentially be an even bigger hit to local news coverage nationwide. All of this has led to the growth of so-called news deserts, places where there is limited access to news outlets. For a look at the fallout from all this, we're joined now by Steve Cavendish. He's editor of the Nashville Banner. That is a nonprofit news startup that he is in the process of relaunching after the paper by the same name folded in 1998. And Penny Abernathy of the University of North Carolina. She's written a major report about the shrinking of local news organizations and how it increases our country's political polarization. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us. Steve Cavendish, I'm going to start with you. You wrote the other day that what's going on right now for journalists is a bloodbath. Is it really that bad?
Well, it has been over a long period of time. Over the last couple of decades, we've seen journalism jobs around the country being cleaved off at a rate like either coal miners or steel workers or fishermen, and those are not what you would call thriving industries. Journalism has had revenue problems for years, and we're starting to see as print is really sort of wiped out, that the conversion over to digital for many of these properties, many of these newspapers, just isn't the same. And so we're seeing with it a lot of jobs lost.
Penny Abernathy, you agree it's that bad, and if so, what's driving this?
Well, I think there are 2 things we need to look at. One is the total loss of newspapers, because newspapers are often the prime, if not the sole source of news and information, especially in small and mid-sized communities. So over the last decade and a half, we've seen 1,800 newspapers disappear off the landscape of the U.S. But there's also the equally troubling situation that we have with the surviving newspapers, where we've lost more than half of the newspaper newsroom journalists that we had just in 2008. We're calling that the rise of the ghost newspaper, in which papers are basically shells of their former selves. And as Steve suggests, it's being driven by a couple of things. One is the rapid decline of advertising, especially print advertising, and the inability of news organizations to make up for that in any kind of digital revenue, be that subscription revenue, be that advertising revenue.
Steve Cavendish, a lot of conversation about the role of these organizations that have become so powerful over the last decade. Facebook, Google, what is their role in all this?
Well, as newspapers have tried to become digital operations and try to sell digital advertising, the problem is that they get into these markets, and Google and Facebook have, between the 2 of them, about 80% of the digital ad market. And so what's left really pushes down on what they can make what you can make as an organization. And so the print dollars that many news chains have walked away from have been replaced by digital dimes or even digital pennies. And that replacement is reflected in the number of jobs that have been lost.
And Penny Abernathy, what does that mean for news consumers, people who have counted on, whether it's a newspaper or something else, for news and information?
Well, it means the rise of news deserts, in which residents in communities, hundreds of communities, even thousands in this country, have very limited access to the sort of news and information that's been the lifeblood of our democracy. Everything from when and where to vote, to topics such as education, health, emergency and safety information that we need. The FCC put out earlier in this decade a list of 8 topics that they consider to be critical information needs for communities. As we've looked at newspapers and the content that comes out of newspapers as well as digital startup sites, we often find that some essential information that we need as citizens and just residents to make wise decisions we don't have access to anymore.
And Steve Cavendish, how do you see that playing out in Tennessee? What are people missing?
Well, so take for example, the Nashville Banner, which was the afternoon paper here and where I got my start in the early 90s, was sold to the Gannett paper here in town, the Tennessean, and closed. When they took about a third of that newsroom and combined it into the Tennessean's staff, so you had about 180 journalists. And that number is now less than 70. And what does that mean? It means that large swaths of what was once covered, of courts, of institutions, of major kind of stories, just don't get covered. And it affects everything from the cover of healthcare, which is a big industry here, to high school sports, to politics. You know, in the last set of elections where we had a Senate and governor's race here back in the fall, you had basically one reporter covering those races each for Gannett owns dailies in three of the 4 biggest markets in Tennessee. And so you're seeing fewer and fewer people covering things. The State House reporting is kind of a crisis across the country. In Tennessee, there were 35 people covering the state legislature and the state government at one time, about 3 decades ago. That number is now 10, and really a couple of those are specialists, so you only have 8 people covering a $37 billion state government and the legislature.
And we've seen that in state after state. And Penny Abernathy, it's so important for us to highlight this, because here in Washington, you look at say a presidential news conference and you see a lot of journalists. You don't get the sense, looking at Washington, what's happened around the country. But I want to ask you about something you've pointed out, and that is how all this contributes to the political polarization in the country. How is that happening?
Well, one of the things that we found through our study of looking at where communities have lost newspapers and where they are living with severely diminished newspapers is that news deserts tend to coalesce around areas that are much poorer, much less well educated, and much older than other types of communities. That can be communities that are in middle inner city neighborhoods, that can be some suburbs around metro areas, and it can be what we call the flyover regions of the country, the rural areas that are out there. I live in what you would call a news desert, the Congressional Ninth, where we still do not have a House of Representatives member because of alleged voter fraud. It is a classic news desert where in 20 years ago or so you could have gotten ample coverage of the congressional race through 3 different newspapers, the Charlotte, the Raleigh, and the Fayetteville paper, and there are no newspapers that circulate in my county now.
What determines quickly, Penny Abernathy, whether this is going to turn around anytime soon?
Well, I'm most optimistic that if you have a publisher and an owner in an area that has a good economic foundation, that if the publisher is both creative and disciplined, that you can turn it around. We've seen several examples of that. Where I am most concerned is on the low-income areas, which I do not see a viable for-profit economic model emerging, and I'm hoping we can begin to get media funders to begin to look at these overlooked areas, because it's critical for our society. It has political, social, and economic implications that are long-term.
So important to focus on this. Penny Abernathy, Steve Cavendish, thank you both.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes,
Couple of weeks are showing once again just how.
okay, you already saw that. Well, here, this is just an example. Well, I mean, certainly, you can see all these counties here in red. Certainly a lot down in Georgia, where, you know, these are counties that have no newspapers, you know, maybe relied on like a TV news source that, you know, maybe responsible for several counties. And then, you know, like these counties in white, they do have multiple newspapers, but the ones in yellow here, you can see they're peppered all over Appalachia. Yes, that only have one newspaper for the county, you know, and often they have shrinking staffs, and so yes. And of those, you know, there are very few locally owned newspapers. I mean, you know, some of these are private corporations. It says here basically the largest 25 newspaper chains owned about 1/3 of all the newspapers in 2004. In 2018, these chains, they own about 2/3 of all dailies. So yes, that means very little local control over what gets printed. And yes, so you can see how these are peppered throughout Appalachia. So, you know, and of course, yes, yeah, well, you know, the newspaper staffs are still shrinking as the profit margins fall, and, you know, of course, advertisers, they certainly pressure newspapers to not print content that's unfavorable to them. So yes, these are 4 that I knew of beforehand. You know, One Hood Media, you know, Unabridged Press, Public Source, My Outlet, Allegheny Independent Media. So, excuse me. So these are 4, like my website, Allegheny Independent Media. You know, it just kind of fell in my lap. My site was supported by a grant from the Leveler Foundation, so I was able to, you know, create some content. I was actually able to buy that GoPro with it. And, you know, this other one here, Public Source, that's another nonprofit news source, you know, with responsible journalists. And One Hood Media covers the African American community in Pittsburgh, and Unabridged Press, it covers you know, the disabled community. Okay, you know, of course, the downside of all, you know, just about anybody can start their own podcast and put anything they want. And of course, yes, there are people who do gravitate towards, say, demagogues like Alex Jones, who puts out lots of dangerous content. You know, of course, you know, he got sued by the victims of the Sandy Hook massacre. And so yes, I mean, all these new media ventures, it is kind of like the Wild West right now. So yes, there is Point Park University does have a Center for Media Innovation trying to help nonprofits out, you know, provide training and resources for new media outlets, you know, to try to improve their, standing, you know, and their longevity. So in some ways, you know, I guess maybe if you can find the right nonprofit news sources for individuals in these news deserts, in the long run, it could, I would argue it could even be more beneficial for them. You know, like if you know which company is running, you know, like if you know which company is running doing bad business for the people or ripping people off, yes, that could be beneficial, you know, so, okay. So, all right, I would, just as you were walking in, sometimes I can't even find, okay, I was just profiling my website. You know what I try to do? I kind of looked at it as a cross between Nate Silver's website. You know who Nate Silver is? He does 538.com. I mean, I'm not trying to forecast elections. I'm just trying to use data to provide better context for what's going on in the area. Let's say, like, I'm from Pennsylvania. So I put, you know, like I put some of these graphs here looking at like regression models, like trying to predict, like to see which characteristics predict, say like Trump's percentage of the vote in 2016, like this one here, this is his 2016 vote, like say counties like Fulton and Bedford, they were some of the whitest counties in the state, so yes, they were more likely to vote, and they were also some of the least educated. You know, even Trump even said, I love the less educated. Even Trump said that. So, and yeah, so even it helps include it all the way down to Philadelphia. You know, it had some of the lowest white populations and the lowest percentage of the vote for Trump in Pennsylvania. So yes, I do look at national polls too. You know, and these are just trends in coronavirus. So yes, I mean, so like right here, like back in December, like right after the 2020 election, that was the worst for Cambria County, like when it came to COVID infections and deaths. You know, Trump did have a big super spreader rally right before the election there, and so yes, and the area did pay for that dearly. And you can see here, like, you know, this is like full vaccinations, you know, and like the trends in cases. Well, this is just one of my books. I don't know, are you familiar with the story of the Johnstown flood? Well, she is.
Just a little bit.
You know, this is probably the most famous image of the aftermath of the flood. I superimposed a graph on it. When, let's say, where are you from?
I'm North Carolina.
North Carolina, okay. Well, you know, Andrew Carnegie and his fellow steel barons in Pittsburgh, they built this fishing and hunting club, you know, with this old earthen dam, but the dam burst and a wall of water went into the city and killed 2,200 individuals. So that's 700 more than died in the Titanic. And this is the most famous image. This is just like a tree trunk that came lodged inside of someone's house. And a man sitting on top of it. So yes, I do lots of data analysis, plus I do have other interviews. Yes, I did talk about the upcoming Appalachian Studies Association conference. You know, looking at, you know, some of the other interviews I did, or like another group called Moms for Liberty that's looking to ban like any books they think are woke from libraries. from libraries in Pennsylvania. So this is the kind of coverage I'm hoping to give to individuals that, you know, that other people might not see. And, you know, with the interviews, I try to give more than a 30-second soundbite to explain what's going on, like even those large, you know, even TV news, that's probably the most they can give. So, okay, well, I did invite some other media outlets who were here. You know, obviously, for whatever reason, they couldn't make it. So, I figure I'll profile them anyway, be Mr. Nice Guy. Like here, this is one called Appalachia. So here, this is Shrewd Smart Hillbillies. You know, this is supposed to be, you know, sort of a humorous look at the area. Okay, let's go to the About section. You know, I was hoping they could be here to proof you know, okay, you know, try to counter the negative. All right, so here, yes. So yes, they interviewed lots of these other individuals. Okay, their co-founder, Chuck Cora, and some of the others, Kaylee Perrett. Okay, so this is another one. This is one in West Virginia, in Charleston. You know, this was a website called Black by God. So, you know, I guess she is, well, I forgot her name, but she did win a big award. Huh?
Crystal Good.
Crystal Good, okay, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, she won a big award last night at the association for her website. So yes, she does lots of, okay, you know, lots of, you know, this is like mostly related to West Virginia for the African American community in West Virginia. So you've heard of them before?
We work with them a lot.
Oh, you do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We've gotten a few things in there, like newsletter for us that'll help promote our events. We do a lot of Black history at the museum,
Okay.
so they're very helpful for us.
Yes, I'm sure. I guess women's history too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes, so that's where you're near Charleston, where your museum's located?
We're about 2 hours from Charleston, but they do a lot of push for us because we try to involve the whole state.
Okay, well, that's a big help. And then the last one I invited here, Black in Appalachia. You know, this is more like a donation site. Nonprofit, works in collaboration with public media, residents, university departments, libraries, and community organizations to highlight, you know, history of contributions in the development of the Mountain South and its culture. So yes, this is more dependent on donations. Okay, well, those are the three. Well, those are the three sites I had. Those are the three ones I found when I was looking walking around the digital, watching around, where they had all the exhibits. So, okay, well, I must confess I am disappointed, but, you know, I am approaching the 1 year anniversary where I have to, like, renew the grant for it. So hopefully I'll have better content. Maybe I'll have my own exhibit at the conference next year. I guess it's going to be in Western Carolina next year. So, okay, well, we'll see. All right, well, that's everything I had for today. Well, are there any questions? I see you're stewing. It looks like you're stewing one over there.
What would be like maybe 3 things you would ideally like to cover on your site?
On my site, well, you know, I mean, actually, I'm doing a lot of what I'd ideally like to cover, you know. Like there is county health rankings, you know, they do provide, you know, like a health ranking for every single county in the US. And they provide, okay, you know, like here, that's based on like lots of different statistics. I mean, for me, the individual statistics are more interesting than the rankings themselves. So, you know, we can show you, at least give you some indication of where some of the health problems are in the area, what might be contributing to either a high ranking or a low ranking, or wherever areas might be needed for improvement. So I'm doing lots of that, you know. I can correlate it with, say, like voting statistics for each county. I can also correlate it with, actually, I'll go back to my website. You know, like here, the first thing, maybe I went over that with Cassidy, and, you know, like looking here, like say, like this 10 county area in central PA, you know, showing that, you know, like here, this is case mortality from COVID. And this is, you know, like the likelihood of dying from COVID if you test positive for it. And this is, say, the average number of mentally unhealthy days. So yes, the higher the mentally unhealthy days are, you know, the more likely someone is to die from COVID in the county. And then down here, these color codes, I guess these lighter pinks, this would be, say, Westmoreland and Center. These are the more vaccinated counties. This is where Center County, that's where Penn State University is. You know, up here, Bedford County, that's one of the least vaccinated, and, you know, one of the highest counties who voted for Trump. So, you know, looking at all these different things, you know, tries to give you, tries to show like a context of some of the social issues. It might not be easy to see with the naked eye. So, yeah, ideally, that's what I do. You know, I try to, I've discussed lots of other individuals, you know, I've interviewed lots of local activists, and, you know, like one of my classmates who's now like a national leader in like trying to get compensation for people who've been sexually abused by Catholic priests. You know, one of them, I have an interview there. I have interviews with, you know, other local leaders, and so, well, probably, maybe not people you would know, but.
Do you have any advice for anyone who might be interested in starting something related to independent media?
Well, I guess, you know, you have to focus on what you're passionate about. Let's see here, I thought I'd highlight you in my video. I am filming this for my video. Yes, I was hoping for a bigger audience, so. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously, yes, you do have to watch your T's and dot your I's and try to stay away from things like Alex Jones just going off half-cocked and accusing people of things, and, you know, that's a great way to get sued. So, you know, but still, you don't want to be too timid and try not to cover things that might be relevant to people's lives. So, you know, you try to give people the information they need to hear, not what you think they want to hear. So what do you do? So in North Carolina?
I teach creative writing at Appalachian State.
Oh, okay. And so like, so that doesn't necessarily just include like prose and poetry.
Yeah, prose and fiction and memoir, yeah.
Oh, memoir. Well, I guess that's nonfiction.